Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Chad, where jubilation filled the streets of the capital city in N'Djamena after military ruler Mohamed Deby was declared the official winner of the presidential elections. According to the state's election body, General Deby won 61.3% of the vote, while his closest rival, Prime Minister Success Masra, won 18.53%. Mr. Masra had earlier declared that he had won with a resounding victory in the first round of voting and that the victory had been stolen from the people. Well, 40-year-old General Deby was installed as Chad's leader by the military after his father, Idriss Deby Itno, was killed during a battle with rebel forces in April 2021. Now, his victory means that the Deby family's 34-year rule will continue. In his victory speech posted on social media, President-elect Deby promised to serve all Chadians in the country. Let's head over to South Africa now. The Constitutional Court is set to decide on an appeal that's questioning former President Jacob Zuma's eligibility to run in this month's election. The court in Johannesburg is hearing the appeal filed by the country's election body after a lower court ruled that Mr. Zuma could run for office. Earlier, the Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, barred him from contesting the May 29 polls. The 82-year-old is fronting a new opposition party that has potentially become a disruptor in the general election. Now, while his party, the Umkhonto weSizwe MK party, is not expected to win enough votes to return the former leader to the presidency, it could cut into the vote share of the dominant governing ANC, that's the African National Congress, and also determine who will be the country's next leader. In the South African Constitution, the president is elected by members of parliament. May 29th election is seen as a race that could tilt the balance of the ANC-led parliament. Well, our correspondent in Johannesburg, Innocent Samosa, joins us now to give us more details. Hello, Innocent.
Well, a very good evening to you, colleague, and our viewers around the world. It's always good to talk to you. Indeed, Jacob Zuma versus the Independent Electoral Commission has reached its highest level at the Constitutional Court. So there are legal questions, political questions, and of course, electoral questions. This is by far one of important moment in South African election. Former President Jacob Zuma going to the Constitutional Court to try to make sure that he can be on the MK party list to go to Parliament. But just to give you a background, there's massive legal implications here and constitutional case. The relationship between constitutional rights, political rights, and also electoral rights. So when you're looking at the law, we ask ourselves, why is the Constitutional Court sitting and listening to this case? But just to give our viewers a background, that there were 3 cases, 2 of which MK party has won. The third one was won by the MK party at the Electoral Court, but appealed, of course, to the Constitutional Court. Now, the first one was speaking about the registration of MK party by the ANC. They were complaining that the ANC does not own MK party, and the MK party won that one. The second one was about trademark, speaking about the logo and the name. And the third one, it's where we find ourselves today, that speaks about the, where former President Jacob Zuma is trying to make sure that he can be on the MK party list to go to Parliament. So by law, we understand that everybody has to send their, their candidate list, the name of the people that they want to represent that particular party in Parliament. So the IEC is of a view that former President Jacob Zuma should not be in Parliament simply because he was charged by the courts for more than 15 months. It was about 15 months, of course. So, in fact, Section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution speaks about it outlines who is eligible to be a member of parliament. So in this case, we find ourselves with an issue where former President Jacob Zuma had to serve 3 months as opposed to 12 months because he was pardoned by President Cyril Ramaphosa because there were issues. He was not feeling well. So now the argument is that the time he served, it was 3 months, not more than 12 months, which then speaks to whether or not the time that he served is equivalent to what he was essentially charged. But we come to understand today, after the Constitutional Court, of course, earlier disqualifying former President Jacob Zuma from going to Parliament, it's also important to remind our viewers that former President Jacob Zuma was not disqualified by the Independent Electoral Commission. He was disqualified by the Constitutional Court.
That's our correspondent there for more on what's happening in South Africa, even as the country is heading to elections. Well, move on to Senegal now. The Blaise Diagne Airport in Dakar has resumed operations after temporarily halting activities as a result of a plane crash on Thursday. A Boeing 737-300 aircraft crashed during takeoff, injuring 11 people, 4 of them severely. Air Senegal flight HC301 was bound for the Malian capital Bamako but skidded off the runway. The pilot was also slightly injured, but most of the passengers on board were not hurt in the incident. Although it's not yet known what caused the crash, the incident further raises questions about the aircraft manufacturer's safety record. Well, joining us now for more on this is Anika Hammerschlag, the VOA's reporter in Dakar. Hello, Anika. Thank you so much for your time. What more can you tell us about Thursday's crash? Have officials been able to determine what caused the accident?
Hi, thanks for having me. There were 85 people on board, including 79 passengers, 2 pilots, and 4 cabin crew. The incident took place at 1:15 a.m. Dakar's airport was temporarily closed, but flights resumed around 9:30 a.m. We don't yet know what caused the accident, but Senegal's Minister of Land and Air Transport issued a statement yesterday saying that the plane had veered off the runway during takeoff. Videos posted to social media show flames coming from the left side of the plane, passengers rushing to disembark down an emergency slide and from a door above the wing. Some described a state of panic during the evacuation. One passenger said the plane had made a first attempt to take off, but that failed. And it was during a second attempted takeoff that smoke began to appear from the wing.
Now, we understand that, the flight was en route Bamako. Do we know of the situation of those injured and, other passengers that were evacuated?
We know that 10 people were injured, including the pilot, and of those 10, 4 were severely injured and taken to a hospital. Senegal's Ministry of Land and Air Transport sent out another press release just 2 hours ago saying those passengers are doing better. The rest of the passengers were taken to a hotel to rest, and a team of psychologists was made available to provide support, but there has been no talk of compensation thus far.
All right, and have we heard anything from, the companies, perhaps the plane maker? We know Boeing has been facing, a deepening crisis over its safety record.
Yes, that's true. Boeing has referred all requests for comment to the airline, saying that carriers operate and maintain their airplanes for upwards of 30 to 40 years. This particular plane was delivered in the 1990s, according to the Aviation Safety Network. Boeing also said they would provide any requested support to their customers. Transair have yet to comment on the accident or what may have caused it. Senegal's Ministry of Land and Air Transport said an investigation is underway. They also issued an apology to all passengers impacted by the incident.
All right then, Anika Hammerschlag, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's move now to East Africa. Peace talks involving South Sudan's government and opposition representatives is underway in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. The talks are between the government and rebel opposition groups that were not part of a 2018 agreement that ended a 5-year civil war. Now, some of the goals set in the 2018 deal included the formation of a unified security force, which has not been met. In an effort to guarantee transparent elections, the main opposition party had called for a fresh round of talks ahead of December's elections. Now, several African presidents are attending the talks and are calling for the end to the conflict in South Sudan, which has crippled the country's economy for many years. Still in Nairobi, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, is urging African countries to optimize the use of existing continental assets to boost local fertilizer production and deliver quality products to African farmers. He was speaking during the session on Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. He stresses that African countries depend mostly on imported fertilizers, which make them very expensive for farmers. The host, Kenyan President William Ruto, emphasized that Africa has 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, which is the central potential for the economic growth of the continent.
Some African countries produce fertilizers, but we depend mostly on imported fertilizers, making them very expensive for our farmers. Yet, the African Center for Fertilizer Development, based in Zimbabwe, has been in existence since the 1980s. We must optimize use of such existing continental assets to boost local fertilizer production and deliver quality fertilizers to African farmers at affordable prices. This is imperative if we are to improve the continent's agricultural sector, key for our food sovereignty and security. These investments should also be reflected in our national budgets.
Africa has 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. That potential is immense. And unlocking that potential is central to our economic growth. Because unlocking that potential not only gives us an opportunity to feed our people and this continent, but also it gives us an opportunity for us to engage in agro-processing, value addition, manufacturing with agro-based raw materials.
Nairobi is also playing host to the United Nations Civil Society Conference, bringing together representatives of civil society, government representatives, senior UN officials, youth changemakers, the academia, and other stakeholders. The UN conference is the premier event on the civil society calendar at the United Nations ahead of the Summit of the Future. It is organized by the UN Department of Global Communications, attracting over 3,000 delegates.
Every day, civil society groups around the world work tirelessly to advance the goals of the United Nations. You fight for global justice, for social justice, and for climate justice. You fight for peace, for gender equality, for human rights, and for the SDGs. And you stand in solidarity with the vulnerable and the marginalized. You also work hand in hand with UN agencies, UN country teams.
As civil society leaders, we have a unique responsibility to lead the way in shaping this future of global and sustainable progress.
We need cooperation and we need solidarity at all levels. The United Nations Secretary General has said repeatedly, today's world demands more effective, more inclusive, and network multilateralism.
Let us direct our efforts towards achieving transformative change, crafting an indelible legacy of peace, progress, prosperity, and sustainability for the present and future generations.
The Nairobi Summit makes a great deal of sense. We will lead to a number of impact coalitions that will provide organized civil society advocacy vehicles to support Pact for the Future commitments.
The medical charity Doctors Without Borders has withdrawn its staff from the only functioning major hospital in Sudan's central Gezira state, citing worsening insecurity. Madani Teaching Hospital, located in the city of Wad Madani, is the only operating hospital. Wad Madani is controlled by the Rapid Support Forces, the paramilitary group that has been fighting Sudan's army since April 2023. Now, MSF says in a statement that the decision is coming more than 3 months of relentless challenges trying to provide care at the hospital. It adds that the hospital had been serving hundreds of thousands of people in dire need of medical assistance. The charity is now urging the army and RSF to stop violating health facilities and guarantee the safety of medical personnel, and also grant the necessary travel permits for staff and supplies. The independent expert on the situation of human rights in Somalia is calling on stakeholders in the country to prioritize on positive developments that would encourage the promotion of democracy, the rule of law, and human rights in Somalia. Aisha Daifan is wrapping up her 3rd visit to the country, the Horn of Africa country, and her latest visit saw her spend 5 days in Mogadishu.
During my meetings with authorities, I discussed the progress achieved by the government since my last visit in November 2023 and challenges encountered to advance the promotion and protection of human rights in Somalia. On the efforts by the government, I commended the successful vote on amendments to the first 4 chapters of the Provisional Constitution of the Federal Government of Somalia by members of the bicameral Federal Parliament. However, I expressed concerns about the lack of consensus among political actors regarding the changes. I call on all parties to prioritize dialogue to build consensus in order to safeguard these positive developments towards enhancing the promotion of democracy, rule of law, and human rights in Somalia.
And back here in Nigeria, the Center for Economic Policy Analysis and Research and the University of Lagos have held a public lecture on macroeconomic policy and the effective management of public finance for sustainable development in the country.
Special Assistant to the Director.
The Center for Economic Policy Analysis and Research of the University of Lagos is contributing to current economic conversations through this public lecture on macroeconomic policy and effective management of public finance for sustainable development.
Thank you very much. I was saying that
the chairman of the event, Professor Akanepo, is practical with his examples as to reasons he believes policies are not making expected impacts.
Implementation of whatever is agreed upon and the coordination. For example, in our economy today, the current president has an economic team, so to say. But that team, there's a challenge because the team consists of ministers and private sector players. Okay? For example, the team, you have $10, you have a Lumenu, you have Dangote and so on and so forth, and you have ministers and some technocrats to discuss policy for the economy. That is inconsistent in terms of the way it should be, because the private sector should be a recipient of policy and not to be policy makers. We call that the macro time inconsistency.
Other realities, such as the mounting debts of the country after the relief received in 2005, the components of the GDP and how to improve the value, among other issues, were discussed, most of which have been captured in the essays in honor of Professor Ndubuisi Nwokoma.
There are practice issues about government management of finance, about issue about Procurement Act. How do you spend money, granting of, giving up of contracts, so that there'll be efficiency in delivery for the ordinary man. So procurement issues, issues of revenue, issue of the budget, issues about the monetary consensus, or they're all in the book. We have policies in Nigeria, but if we don't adopt them, it will not work. It's like you have a very good pot of soup. Unless you eat, you will not get the benefit of that pot of soup.
The center is asking for close collaboration between the academia and policy makers for better implementation of ideas and strategies and a better outcome in the economy.
A delegation from Zambia has visited the Nigeria Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, in Abuja to explore possible collaboration and study an approach to engaging with Nigerians in the diaspora and how it influences the nation's economy. The Zambian delegation was on a study tour led by the Zambian High Commissioner to Nigeria. While receiving the delegation, the chairman CEO of NIDCOM, represented by the Secretary of the Commission, charged African leaders to take up strategic relations with their diaspora.
The national diaspora policy hinges on three main issues. One, to engage with the Nigerians in the diaspora. Two, to empower them to engage with Nigeria as a nation. Three, to enable them that through this engagement and empowerment, they will contribute to national development. We call it the 3E principles: engage, empower, and enable. So we have a copy here. We also discovered that there is the need for us to map out who is in the diaspora, what skills they have, and also where they live.
To promote the diaspora as an important source and facilitator of research, because we do know that there is a lot of knowledge that our diaspora actually wields, as well as skills.
And finally, on the program, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan, have arrived in Nigeria for their 72-hour tour to promote the Invictus Games. They arrived this morning in Abuja aboard a British Airways flight, which was slightly delayed after the scheduled pilot went sick and a replacement had to be quickly arranged. They were received by some Nigerian officials at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. This afternoon, the couple visited the defense headquarters where they were given the traditional military welcome.
That's a motorcade of Harry and Meghan driving into the defense headquarters in Abuja. This is the couple's first visit to Nigeria, and it's at the instance of the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa.
Ready for inspection. Your Highness.
At the defense headquarters, Harry inspected the Guard of Honor. And the couple were given the traditional military welcome. Earlier in the day, the couple visited the Lightway Academy in Abuja to promote mental health among teens. Their visit is to primarily promote the Invictus Games after Harry met the Nigerian team and the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, at last year's competition in Düsseldorf, Germany. The couple is due to meet with injured service members at a military hospital in Kaduna. They'll also attend a training session for the charity organization Nigeria Unconquered, which collaborates with the Invictus Games, as well as a reception where military families will be honored. On Saturday, the couple will attend a training session for the organization, Nigeria Unconquered, and a reception hosted by the Chief of Defense Staff in honor of military families. In the afternoon, Megan will co-host an event of women in leadership with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization. On Sunday, the couple will attend a basketball clinic with Giants of Africa, a cultural reception, and a polo fundraiser for Nigeria Unconquered.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde. Have a lovely weekend.